Welcome to another presentation of Curtis Jones writing. I'm on chapter 13 of Love Endures All Things, Book 2, Across the Creek. If you like what I do, uh, you could hit the like button and share it with your friends if you think they'd enjoy this. And you ought to subscribe to it so you're notified every time if you do enjoy these. You ought to subscribe to it so you could be notified each time I post a new video. If you're getting a hurry to know these stories, you can go to my webpage, which gives you a synopsis of all of the books I've written, and as the in the book as a whole, rather than by individual stories. And you could go to curtis-jones-books.squarespace.com, or you can find me on YouTube at Curtis Jones author page on YouTube. Both those sites have links that will take you to the Amazon store where they sell my books. And if you enjoy these and you get in a hurry, you can either get them in paperback or in ebook. And some of the books are starting to come in hardback because I've had requests for people who wanted to give them as gifts because they enjoyed them so much. I hope you enjoy these, and let's get started with chapter 13. Title of this chapter is Last Year on the Fringe. Stephanie had been working for more than 10 years for a company that killed and processed chickens, meat processing company. It was a local company that was trying to expand. It was located in Fort Smith, Arkansas. When she started working for the company, she was a line quality assurance control worker called QC or QA for short. She really liked her job and hoped to work her way up the ladder. After 10 years, she had moved up to QA plant supervisor. That was just below the management position she wanted to occupy. She had been passed over 2 times in the last 2 years, and she asked why. She was told that she needed to have a bachelor's degree to work in the position. She had to train each of those managers that were hired. They both quit after just a few months. Stephanie filled in the position and did the work when they left, so she was already doing that job. It was upsetting her to know that that the company wanted to pay her the lower wage that the position she held offered when she was actually doing the much higher wage job without any help. Stephanie didn't want to quit her job even if they treated her poorly. She said she only had 17 years until she could retire. She would laugh about what she had said, but I knew it hurt her. I could tell it was something she didn't like at all. We lived out in Nycut for about 18 years, and we were comfortable with the life. We had been hooked up to the electric company for several years by this time. We still had to deal with the creek when it was high. We were quite happy with our place in the world. Most of our friends lived within 75 miles of us, and Stephanie's family lived in both California and in Michigan. most of my family lived there. My sister Betty was always a Western girl. We both got along with my family, but most of Stephanie's family were a little different. She didn't always get along with them. Her father thought she was not his child and said so often, which hurt Stephanie badly. My family had become her family, as sometimes happens. When things are the happiest, they seem to go south the quickest. This event happened in the summer when the creek was at the lowest of the whole year. In fact, the water was not even running over the low water bridge at the slab. I don't have I didn't have to go meet Stephanie and help her home in those days. When she went to work as usual, and I worked on the place, which I usually did most days. The day passed along without anything unusual happening. The evening came, and I fixed dinner and watched television until Stephanie called me. She would call at her lunch break about 8:30 and again at quitting time most of the time after midnight. I always stayed up until she got home and was safe, and I knew it. I always met her at the back door and kissed her and welcomed her home. I would say, "Man, it's been a long dry spell without you here," or something to that effect. She always laughed and kissed me back at the door, and I'm sure that God had made me for her and her for me. We sat up for a few minutes and then went to bed. We talked for a while. I wanted to I wanted her to talk about her day so it was easier for her to go to sleep. She decided to go and shower, and when she came back to bed, we got frisky for a little while and then were ready for sleep. We turned the lights off and were still for a few minutes when I asked her to get up and take me to the ER. I asked her in a low and quiet voice. I didn't want to excite her. She said, "I was almost asleep. Don't joke about things like that." I said, I was almost asleep too, but I think something's going on with my heart. I decided or described what I was feeling as I got up and got dressed. We were ready in a couple of minutes and we headed out to the car. I asked her to drive and I got in the passenger side. We didn't talk much as we drove toward Fort Smith, which was an hour long drive from our house. I began to get very hot and I asked her to turn the air down as cold as she could, and I was sweating badly by then. I didn't hurt anywhere, but I was getting out of breath. I wasn't scared, but I was concerned about Stephanie. She drove faster than she usually did. When we got to the ER, she pulled under the canopy and jumped out and disappeared inside. Then two ER techs and a nurse came running out to help me. The ER was almost empty at 3 a.m., so that was lucky for me. They pulled me or put me in a wheelchair and rushed me into an examining room, and Stephanie stayed right there with me until the doctor asked her to leave the room after about 3 minutes into the exam. She squeezed my hand, and as she left, a tear ran down her cheek. That made me so sad to see her in such a pain. I then turned my attention to what was going on, they called for a shot to be given to me and to take a couple of aspirins. Just then, I exploded with projectile vomiting that struck the doctor's smock. I had drank a glass of buttermilk just before Stephanie got home. I was sure that they would be through with me when that happened, but they didn't. The doctor had to change and call for a janitor. Things were calmed down by 5 a.m., and they sent me to a room on the cardiac floor. Stephanie stayed until about 7 a.m. The doctor came back in and told her she should go home and get some rest. She looked at me as if to say, "Is that okay?" I waved my hand and she gave me a warm kiss and said, "I'll see you this afternoon." The doctor said that about 15 minutes longer and I would have been a goner. I was so lucky to have survived. It didn't change me for another 2 years. I still smoked, and all the other habits, bad habits that I had continued. It did, on the other hand, change Stephanie right away. The doctor asked what was going on just before the heart attack. She told him we'd had a sexual tryst. She decided that she had almost killed me. At least that is what she came to believe. The blocked vein was caused by our activity, but I only had 15% blockage. The doctor told me it probably would not happen again, but that he makes no guarantee. I was put on Coumadin, a strong blood thinner, to keep that from happening again. My doctor didn't tell me much about the medicine he had put me on. I was asked, or I was kept in the hospital for 7 days and sent home with no procedure done other than the heart catheterization. I slept through it and didn't even know much about it. The heart attack took the wind out of my sails. I had almost no energy and no stamina for almost a whole year after the heart attack. I went on Social Security within about 6 months. The heart attack had robbed my brain of oxygen for almost too long a time. My short term memory was disrupted severely, and I went uh, to the hearing for Social Security. I could not remember anything that the judge asked me about. I told him I just don't know, but that Stephanie helped me to fill out the paperwork that he was reviewing. He asked me about 6 questions that I didn't remember, and then he dismissed me. The lawyer had a disappointed look on his face. On the way home, Stephanie and I talked about the hearing and said it was in God's hands. About 3 weeks later, I got a letter saying that I was approved for disability payments. Stephanie was so stressed out by this time that she needed some time off, and we had received an invitation to visit our daughter in Carthage, Mississippi. We made arrangements for Stephanie to be off for a week and planned the trip. We had not seen her for a few months, and it sounded fun. We headed out to Mississippi early one morning and spent the next few hours traveling to Carthage, Mississippi. It turned out to be an eventful trip that brought the next change to our lives. The husband she had then would beat her up from time to time. He asked me to come outside and try out his new deer rifle. He wanted to show me what a good shot he was. He fired 3 shots at a target and hit in the third ring with all 3 bullets. He then handed me the gun and asked me to top that. I fired 3 shots, and 2 were in the bullseye, and the third was in the first ring outside the bullseye. He suddenly looked angry to me, but he said nothing. He put his nice rifle up, and we didn't talk about that anymore. When we sat down for dinner, he told Michelle that I had outshot him. She said she could outshoot him too. He asked if She asked if he was surprised that her father could do the same. She told him both her mother and father had taken a couple of courses in rifles and pistols in college, and we had. We went to lunch the next day in Jackson, Mississippi for Italian. They were closed because it was being remodeled. He was mad at that. We stopped at a fast food joint and went back to their house. They served us dinner and we talked for a little while and went to bed. When we woke up the next morning, I had blood in my urine. I didn't understand why. Then I noticed that my knees were swollen and painful. It was Saturday morning. I told Stephanie I wanted to go back home. It seemed that Michelle's husband had struck her several times while we slept. She decided she wanted to go home with us. Her husband had been called in to work to repair some equipment. She wrote him a note and we loaded in the car and headed home. By this time, my knees were swollen bigger than I'd ever seen them before. I couldn't walk on them anymore. Stephanie had to drive us back home. Travel looked to be promising as we left Carthage, but as we passed through Memphis, Tennessee, and moved on to Interstate 40, we were stuck in traffic. It took just over twice the time going back to Oklahoma. We were very tired when we pulled into the driveway. Home never looked so beautiful as it does at the end of a long and hard drive. Home was absolutely gorgeous. We all slept like small children that night. I had to set an appointment with a knee doctor, and he saw me on Wednesday at 10 a.m. He said I had to be taken off of the blood thinner medication before he could drain the swelling from my knees. By this time, both were huge. I had to see the heart doctor to be removed from the thinner. I saw him by Friday, and he gave me a vitamin K shot to help thicken my blood. By Tuesday, I was able to have the blood in my knee joints removed. That was a very painful sequence of events. The heart doctor put me back on Coumadin to help keep down the possibility of another heart attack. It seemed that I was accumulating an abundance of the drug in my blood. The doctor had not ordered any checks on the level of it in my blood, and that was the cause of the event. Within a month, I had a severe nosebleed that started just before Stephanie got home from work. When she was home, she saw the bleeding from my nose and called the nurse at her workplace to get a professional opinion. It had been bleeding for over an hour by then. The nurse recommended I go to the ER from home. I held a 16-ounce foam cup under my nose and collected 8 ounces of blood by the time the 1 hour drive was over. I was put into the exam room, and a doctor came in right away. He sent Stephanie out of the room, telling her she would not want to be there as they worked on me. They said my screams of pain would unnerve her. It was because this was going to hurt very badly. They made an understatement by saying that. I thought death would have been better than this. They took a 2-inch roll of gauze and stuffed the whole roll up in my nasal passage. The bleeding continued, and they then took a nasal balloon and shoved it up the same passage and then inflated it. By the time they stopped the bleeding, I had a black eye on that side of my face. I spent a week in the hospital over a simple nosebleed. It was caused by the Coumadin again. They had to thicken my blood before they could treat me. When I saw the heart doctor, I fired him and said, "You almost killed me 2 times with that drug you put me on." After the heart attack, Stephanie and I began to look for a house closer to town and near the doctor I might need. We found a lovely 3-bedroom house in Muldrow, Oklahoma, that was only 10 miles from Fort Smith. We were happy with the house, and one extra benefit was we didn't have to deal with the creek anymore. I started working on the house and installed a gas fireplace. We really liked this place. Stephanie had been transferred to a freezer plant that her company had built in Muldrow. It only took her 5 minutes to drive to work and home. Another management position opened up that Stephanie qualified for, and she was passed over again. This was the last straw for Stephanie. She and I talked, and she decided to put her name on the internet as looking for a QC management position. Once one of the headhunters gets wind of somebody looking for a position on the internet, they pass that name to all their comrades. You will get a job from doing this. Thank you for staying with me through this portion of the story. I'll be doing another in just a little bit. It'll be posted the next day. It'll be chapter 14, A New Beginning. If you like what I do, subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything, and you'll be notified every time I post something. If you enjoyed what I do, share it with a friend if you think they'll like it. These 5 books, Dad's Old Truck 1 and 2, and Love Endures All Things 1, 2, and 3, are my whole life story up until I was 71, 72 years old. If you get in a hurry for these things, you can go to my webpage, which is curtis-jones-books.squarespace.com, or you can go to my Facebook page, which is Curtis Jones Author Page, Facebook. Both of those sites have descriptions of the books, and they also have links that'll take you to Amazon, where you could buy these books either in the paperback format or in the ebook format if you have an electronic reader. Share these with your friends. Like it. That's what helps me be able to keep presenting these. God bless you, and I'll be presenting another story here in a little bit, but I will post one a day because I'm still working on this deck out there. I tell you, when you get in your mid-70s, it ain't easy to do that stuff. 2-day job now has taken me a little over a week, and I'm about half done. Maybe a week and a half. I don't know. I think someone told me I was on it 2 weeks. But anyway, it slows down. God bless you. Take care. Until the next time. Goodbye.